What happens when China attacks a U.S. aircraft carrier? Imagine a world where tensions between the U.S. and China have reached their peak. In the dead of night, the unthinkable happens. China launches a surprise attack on a U.S. aircraft carrier, the mighty USS Nimitz. The crew is thrown into chaos as incoming hypersonic missiles close in, faster than any defense system the U.S. has ever faced. The radar blares and countermeasures are deployed, but will it be enough? As the bombs fall, the world watches in stunned silence. This attack doesn't just threaten military assets. It could alter the very course of global power. The fallout is immediate. NATO calls an emergency session, while Russia and other world powers react swiftly. Global markets plummet, and diplomatic channels are flooded with urgent conversations. As the U.S. military scrambles to assess the damage, one thing becomes clear. This event has the potential to shift the entire military strategy of the United States. But is this the dawn of a new age of warfare? Or will the U.S. retaliate with new technologies capable of countering these advanced Chinese tactics? The question remains, how will the world respond to this bold strike, and what consequences will follow for both superpowers? Imagine this. The U.S. Navy's most powerful weapon, a giant aircraft carrier like the USS Nimitz, is peacefully cruising the waters of the South China Sea when, without warning, China launches a surprise attack. What happens next is a chaotic, high-stakes battle for survival. But it's not just about the U.S. and China anymore. The fate of global security hangs in the balance. In this video, we'll break down exactly what goes down when China strikes at the heart of America's military might. To understand why this attack could change everything, we need to dive into the history of U.S.-China relations. For decades, the U.S. and China have been locked in a fierce rivalry. China's growing military power, especially in the South China Sea, is challenging U.S. dominance in the region. The U.S. Navy, with its fleet of massive aircraft carriers, has been the cornerstone of American military power, projecting strength across the world. The aircraft carrier isn't just a warship. It's a floating fortress, a symbol of global influence. But as tensions grow, the question arises, can this symbol of power withstand a full-scale attack from a nation like China, with its advanced missile technology and military innovations? Let's break down the scenario. It's 2025, and the U.S. Navy is on high alert. China's military has grown stronger, and its hypersonic missiles are now capable of reaching speeds faster than anything the U.S. can intercept. Early in the morning, as the USS Nimitz cruises along its patrol route, a missile warning goes off. But it's too late. China's hypersonic missiles, traveling at over Mach 5, are already on their way. The crew on board the Nimitz scrambles to deploy countermeasures, but the missile is too fast to be stopped by standard defense systems. The crew's only hope is the quick launch of fighter jets and electronic warfare. As the bombs fall, the question on everyone's mind is, can the U.S. respond fast enough? The attack isn't just devastating to the U.S. Navy. It sends shockwaves around the world. Within hours, global news outlets are reporting on the attack. Leaders from every corner of the globe begin reacting. The U.S. government holds an emergency session, but what happens next isn't clear. China has just made a bold move, and the world isn't sure whether this will lead to World War III. NATO immediately calls for a summit to discuss the next steps. Meanwhile, Russia watches closely, knowing that this could be the spark that sets off a global conflict. The global economy reacts swiftly, with stock markets plunging and trade routes becoming uncertain. The world is watching closely, and the consequences are immediate. With the USS Nimitz severely damaged, the U.S. Navy faces a serious crisis. The question now is, how can the U.S. respond? Aircraft carriers have been the cornerstone of U.S. naval power. But this attack has shown their vulnerability to modern missile technology. The U.S. military begins analyzing what went wrong, and the Pentagon quickly starts looking at new countermeasures. Are aircraft carriers still relevant? Will the U.S. start investing in new technologies like laser defense systems or unmanned drone warfare? This attack could be the turning point in the future of military strategy, not just for the U.S. but for the entire world. The U.S. military needs to innovate fast. As the days pass, the world's response to China's bold move becomes clearer. The U.S. prepares for potential retaliation, but how far will they go? Will this escalate into an all-out war, or will diplomacy intervene? On the other side, China's government stands firm in its position, claiming the attack was a response to perceived U.S. aggression in the region. The U.S. faces increasing pressure from its allies and foes alike, as the world waits to see how the superpowers will react. In the midst of all this, there's a shift in global alliances. Some nations begin to question whether the U.S. can still lead the free world, while others rally behind its commitment to defending global freedom. As we reach the final moments, one thing is clear. The attack on a U.S. aircraft carrier changes the global military landscape forever. The question remains, what comes next? Will the world be able to avoid a full-scale war, or is this just the beginning of a new era of conflict? The U.S. Navy will need to adapt, innovate, and learn from this devastating attack. But the future is uncertain. One thing is for sure, the power dynamics between China and the U.S. will never be the same. As the world holds its breath, we must ask, who will come out on top in this high-stakes game of global dominance? Imagine the scene. In the year 2025, tensions between the U.S. and China have reached a boiling point. The U.S. Navy's mighty aircraft carrier, the USS Nimitz, is patrolling the South China Sea, its massive hull cutting to the waves, surrounded by fighter jets and military personnel. The situation is tense, but nothing prepares the crew for what's coming. Without warning, China launches a devastating surprise attack. Hypersonic missiles, traveling faster than anything the U.S. has ever faced, streak across the sky. The radar blares a warning, but it's already too late. The missiles hit the aircraft carrier with shocking speed, devastating the ship and throwing the crew into chaos. The world watches in stunned silence as the attack sends shockwaves through global security. This isn't just about military assets. It's a direct challenge to the U.S. military's dominance and could change the global balance of power forever. As the missiles fall, global leaders scramble for answers. NATO calls an emergency session, while Russia and other powers react swiftly, fearing that this could escalate into a full-scale war. Meanwhile, the global economy faces a massive shock as markets plunge and diplomatic channels flood with urgency. The U.S. military is forced to respond, but can it adapt in time? The aftermath of this attack is more than just physical damage to a ship. It forces the U.S. to reassess its entire military strategy. How will the U.S. retaliate, and what will this attack mean for the future of warfare? Following the devastating attack on the USS Nimitz, the world is thrust into a new era of uncertainty. The U.S. military begins scrambling to assess the full extent of the damage. Hypersonic missiles, traveling at speeds beyond Mach 5, have proven to be more dangerous than any defense system the U.S. could deploy. The U.S. Navy, once invincible in its dominance, now faces a significant vulnerability. The question is, how did China manage to pull off such a bold strike? Hypersonic weapons are a game changer, capable of evading even the most advanced missile defense systems. These missiles don't just fly fast, they maneuver unpredictably, making them nearly impossible to intercept. The sudden vulnerability of aircraft carriers, long considered the cornerstone of U.S. naval power, shakes the foundation of American military strategy. The world watches as global markets react violently to the attack, with stock prices plunging and nations on edge. NATO and Russia immediately convene, each trying to predict the next move and what it means for the future of global security. Will this lead to a new arms race in hypersonic missile technology? And what does this mean for global diplomacy? As the U.S. assesses the attack's damage, the next phase begins: military response. With their flagship aircraft carriers severely damaged, the U.S. must reevaluate its strategy. Will they increase reliance on unmanned drones, laser defense systems, or even new AI technologies to protect their fleet? This attack could be the push that forces the U.S. military to innovate rapidly in a way that could change the nature of warfare. We could see a shift from traditional carriers to more flexible and advanced technologies that better handle threats like China's hypersonic missiles. But the U.S. isn't the only player in this game. China's own ambitions grow with each passing day. How will the U.S. respond to these escalating challenges? Will diplomacy play a role in de-escalating the situation, or will we see a surge of military responses that could tip the world into a new kind of Cold War? The attack on the USS Nimitz isn't just a military clash. It's a turning point in how we view warfare. It could be the beginning of a new world order, where missile technology, AI, and unmanned warfare shape how conflicts are fought. As the global powers adjust, the question becomes, will this event spark World War III, or will it force all nations to rethink their approach to conflict and power? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain. This is just the beginning of a new era in global military strategy, and the world will never be the same. The year is 2025. Tensions between the U.S. and China are higher than ever before. In the heart of the South China Sea, the USS Nimitz, one of the U.S. Navy's most powerful aircraft carriers, is patrolling, surrounded by fighter jets and military personnel. The ship is part of a larger military presence that serves as a symbol of American power. But things are about to change. In the dead of night, China launches a surprise attack on the USS Nimitz. Hypersonic missiles scream toward the ship, moving at speeds no defense system can intercept. The radar blares a warning, but it's already too late. The missiles strike, tearing through the Nimitz's hull. The crew scrambles, countermeasures are deployed, but nothing can stop the oncoming disaster. The attack is swift and devastating, and the world watches in shock. But this is more than an assault on a ship. This attack is a message. China is now challenging the U.S. for supremacy on the global stage, and the attack on the Nimitz is just the beginning. Hypersonic weapons, traveling at speeds over Mach 5, 5 times the speed of sound, are at the heart of this attack. These missiles move faster than any interceptor the U.S. has, making them incredibly difficult to stop. They're not just fast, they're also highly maneuverable. Unlike ballistic missiles, which follow a predictable arc, hypersonic missiles fly low and change directions unpredictably. This makes them incredibly hard to track, even with the most advanced radar systems. The attack on the USS Nimitz exposed a crucial vulnerability in U.S. defense systems. Aircraft carriers, once considered unsinkable symbols of power, now seem vulnerable to this new generation of weaponry. This vulnerability isn't limited to just the Nimitz. Other aircraft carriers in the fleet could face similar threats. The U.S. Navy is forced to rethink its entire strategy. Can aircraft carriers still be the backbone of U.S. naval power in the 21st century, or will they become obsolete in the face of evolving technology? As this realization sinks in, experts begin discussing solutions. Could laser defense systems or electromagnetic weapons be the future? Or will the U.S. need to invest more in unmanned vehicles and drones that could evade these new threats? The attack has forced the Pentagon into a critical moment. Adapt to new technologies or risk falling behind. The immediate fallout of the attack is felt worldwide. The U.S. government scrambles to assess the damage to the Nimitz, and NATO immediately calls for an emergency session. Global stock markets react sharply, with investors fearing that the situation could escalate into a full-blown war. The Chinese government, on the other hand, remains eerily silent. But behind the scenes, Beijing is watching closely. The attack on the USS Nimitz is a direct challenge to U.S. dominance in the Pacific, and China's increasing military capabilities suggest they are prepared to continue testing these limits. Other world powers, like Russia, begin to weigh their own responses, considering how this attack could affect their strategic interests. The Middle East, Europe, and Africa all feel the shockwaves as their political and economic landscapes are shaken. The world is unsure what's coming next, and nations begin aligning themselves with either the U.S. or China, further polarizing global relations. Diplomatic channels are flooded with urgent conversations. Is this the start of a new Cold War? Will China's challenge to the U.S. lead to military confrontation, or can diplomatic efforts calm the waters? As world leaders try to steer the global ship away from disaster, the threat of further escalations hangs heavily over the international community. With the attack on the Nimitz shaking the core of the U.S. Navy, what happens next? The Pentagon has no choice but to adjust its strategy. The U.S. military begins exploring new defense technologies to counter the growing hypersonic threat. Laser weapons could become the answer. Laser systems, which have been in development for years, could one day be capable of intercepting incoming hypersonic missiles with precision. This is an exciting frontier in military technology that could offer the U.S. Navy a way to defend against attacks like the one on the Nimitz. Another solution might lie in unmanned systems, such as drones or autonomous submarines, which should be sent into battle without putting human lives at risk. The development of these systems would allow the U.S. to stay one step ahead of adversaries like China, who are also investing heavily in autonomous and AI-powered military technologies. But while these technological advancements are promising, the attack raises a more significant question. Should the U.S. rethink its reliance on large, vulnerable assets like aircraft carriers? Could future warfare be fought without these massive symbols of power? The attack on the Nimitz might signal the end of the traditional aircraft carrier era. If the U.S. military doesn't adapt quickly, it could lose its naval edge to adversaries like China. The attack on the USS Nimitz is just the beginning of a new age of warfare. The future of conflict may no longer revolve around traditional battleships, aircraft carriers, and tanks. Instead, warfare could be defined by cyber attacks, artificial intelligence, drone swarms, and hypersonic missile technology. These technologies are already being developed by China, Russia, and the U.S. to wage war in completely new ways. With cyber attacks and AI-powered systems, the line between military operations and cyber warfare is increasingly blurred. We could soon see military strategies that rely more on information warfare than physical battles. This shift towards autonomous and AI-driven warfare could dramatically change the battlefield. Imagine a world where drones control the skies, AI systems make split-second decisions on targeting, and the concept of boots on the ground becomes obsolete. It's a future where superpowers may not face off in direct combat, but instead engage in an ongoing battle of innovation and technology. In this new world, it may not be about who has the most tanks or fighter jets. It's about who controls the most advanced technology. As we reflect on the implications of the attack on the USS Nimitz, one thing is clear. The world has entered a new era of warfare. The boundaries of traditional military power are being redefined. Hypersonic missiles, AI, and unmanned systems will shape the future of military conflict. Will the U.S. rise to the challenge and adapt to these new threats? Or will China's growing technological advancements shift the balance of power in the Pacific? Only time will tell, but the attack on the Nimitz serves as a stark reminder. The world's military landscape is changing, and nations must prepare for a future that's both uncertain and unpredictable. This is a moment in history that will redefine global power, and the U.S. must now decide how to respond. Imagine a world where the unthinkable happens. China launches a surprise attack on a U.S. aircraft carrier, the USS Nimitz, in the dead of night, amidst rising tensions between the two superpowers. As hypersonic missiles rush towards the ship faster than any defense system can handle, the crew scrambles into action, trying to deploy countermeasures. But the attack isn't just a strike on military assets. It's a blow to global stability. NATO is immediately called into emergency sessions, while global markets react with panic, plummeting across the world. In the midst of the chaos, world leaders, including those from Russia, Europe, and Asia, scramble to respond. Some might take diplomatic routes, while others see this as a reason to escalate tensions. China's motivations remain unclear. Was it a demonstration of military power, an attempt to reshape the balance of power in the Pacific, or a response to years of rising U.S. influence in the region? The impact is felt beyond just the battlefield. With global trade routes now in jeopardy, oil prices spiking, and stock markets crashing in response. The military response becomes a priority, with the U.S. Navy scrambling to assess the damage to the Nimitz and other vital assets, while new strategies are formed to counter China's growing hypersonic weapons arsenal. Hypersonic technology, capable of outrunning any current missile defense system, shifts the global military balance. The U.S. is forced to rethink its reliance on traditional strategies, investing heavily in new technologies like AI-powered drones, high-energy lasers, and cyber warfare tactics. But as the U.S. prepares its retaliation, the world watches closely, wondering whether this marks the beginning of a new era of warfare, one where autonomous drones and space-based technologies may be the future of military combat. The attack raises important questions. How will superpowers adapt in an age of AI and cyber threats? What role will diplomacy play in avoiding full-scale conflict? Will humanity be able to prevent a new kind of war? Or are we already seeing the emergence of a digital and space-age battlefield that could change the course of global power forever? The world is suddenly thrown into chaos as China launches a surprise attack on the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Nimitz in the dead of night. Tensions between the U.S. and China have been steadily escalating for years, with disputes over Taiwan, the South China Sea, and trade conflicts threatening to spark a broader conflict. The attack comes without warning, as a wave of hypersonic missiles hurtled toward the Nimitz, moving faster than any defense system the U.S. has in place. The crew of the Nimitz is thrown into immediate chaos as alarms blare, and the ship's defenses try to intercept the incoming missiles. But the sheer speed and power of the hypersonic weapons overwhelm them. As the missiles hit their target, devastating explosions rock the ship, and the world holds its breath. The U.S. military scrambles to assess the damage, while NATO immediately calls an emergency session, seeking answers on how to respond to this unprecedented act of aggression. Global markets react with panic, with stock prices plummeting, oil prices soaring, and a growing sense of uncertainty hanging over the world. The attack not only targets the U.S. military, but sends a powerful message to the rest of the world about China's growing military capabilities. As world leaders from Russia, the EU, and other powers respond, the global landscape is drastically reshaped. Some nations call for restraint and diplomacy, while others see the attack as a reason to ramp up military preparedness. China's motives remain unclear. Was a show of strength, a calculated move to challenge the U.S. military presence in the Pacific, or a direct response to the increasing presence of U.S. forces near its borders? With military assets crippled, the U.S. Navy faces the daunting task of assessing the damage and figuring out the next move. Meanwhile, China's hypersonic technology, faster and more powerful than anything the U.S. military has faced, sets a new standard for modern warfare. The attack forces the U.S. to reconsider its military strategy, accelerating research into new countermeasures like high-energy lasers, AI-powered drones, and advanced cyber warfare tactics. This event marks a pivotal moment in military history, as the U.S. and its allies must decide whether to retaliate with conventional force, launch cyber attacks, or enter into diplomatic talks to prevent a larger conflict. The fallout of the attack goes far beyond the military sphere, with global trade routes disrupted, economies shaken, and nations forced to reconsider their alliances and strategies for the future. As the dust settles, the world wonders what the future of warfare holds. Will we see an era dominated by cyber warfare, space-based technologies, and autonomous weapons? Or will the balance of power shift as nations invest more heavily in AI-driven strategies and hypersonic weaponry, leaving the traditional forms of warfare behind? As tensions continue to rise, the ultimate question remains: how will the U.S., China, and the rest of the world respond to this unprecedented attack? And what will be the consequences of this new age of military conflict?